A flat rock. Small rock or big rock? Big rock, right? You have to be intentional with picking out the perfect rock, and you set it down, you make sure it's steady and sturdy, and now it's time to find rock number 2. How important is rock number 2?
Not important as rock 1, but it's important.
Okay.
Rock you put on is important.
Say that again. Say that really loud.
Every rock that you put on is important.
Every rock that you put on is important. I'm glad we didn't have to get to rock like 13 before somebody said that. There are times where I go on, I'm like, come on, every rock's important, right? Every single rock that we put in our stack is important. We can't just pick up any random rock. We have to be intentional with the rocks we're putting on our stack. If we want to build a tall stack of rocks, we don't care if we only get 2, 3, 4 rocks. It doesn't matter what kind of rocks we put in our stack. I want you to think of the stack of rocks like life. You see, oftentimes the decision that someone makes early on in their life is going to determine who they become and where they go. All right, anybody disagree with me? All right, follow along here. If this whole stack of rocks is life, maybe that first rock is early childhood, all the way through elementary school, okay? And maybe rock number 2 is middle school. Rock number 3 is high school. Rock number 4 is college age. The decisions that we make oftentimes in those first 4 rocks determines where we're going to go and who we're going to become, just like our stack of rocks. But at the end of the day, each and every single one of us are just one bad decision away from putting one bad rock in our stack. You see, today we are the result of the decisions we made yesterday, and tomorrow we will be a result of the decisions that we make today. And oftentimes as adults, we understand that concept, but unfortunately, oftentimes children and teens, they have that risky behavior, that part of their brain that hasn't developed yet that says, hey, you probably shouldn't do that, and they don't understand the long-term consequences of those decisions. So let's jump into this. As we go throughout the state of Kentucky, and as I do investigations, this is what I see time and time and time again. As I open up the nightstand next to the bed and I see this, I start asking a series of questions to the person that's inside there that we're doing the investigation on. And it used to go like, hey, where'd you get your dope? Do you want to work for us? Do you want to try to this and that and that and the other? And then my questions have completely changed, right? And so I open up the nightstand and I'm like, hey, man, what's this? And they're like, oh, the syringes? And I'm like, yeah, what's up with the syringes? And they're like, oh, my aunt, she's a diabetic. Every time, no kidding, right? It's just as likely as if I stop a car that I think has been drinking, and I say, hello, sir, how many drinks have you had tonight? What do I always get? 2, right? It's always 2, and I'm like, and then they're like hammered. I'm like, 2 what, right? And they're like fifths, and I'm like, no, that's way more than 2, right? And so then I'm like, what's up with the spoon? And we go through all this, but finally at the end of the conversation, all the cards are on the table, and this person knows that I know what's going on, and the game's up. So I simply turn around to that person and I say, what's your story? They say, well, I suffer from a heroin addiction. I'm like, all right. And they say, I've tried to quit and I can't. Right? I need some help. I said, well, when did you get started? I say, oftentimes the answers are always the same. They say, well, I started in elementary school. And I look at them like, you started heroin in elementary school? And they're like, no, nobody does that, right? I'm like, well, how did you start? And they said, I started stealing beers out of my dad's fridge in elementary school. I started getting drunk on the weekends, whatever it was. In middle school, I started smoking cigarettes and I was drinking. I started smoking marijuana. In high school, I started using XYZ, and then this kind of starts changing. But eventually, they get to the point where they got on prescription pain pills, and then they switched over to heroin because it was a whole lot cheaper and they couldn't afford their pills anymore. And I've asked that question dozens and dozens of times, and oftentimes they started out with some intoxicating substance other than what they're on before the age of 14. And so whenever we're talking tonight, I want you to have in the back of your mind, we're talking 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. That's what we're talking about tonight. There's something about that 14 magic number that usually usage, some kind of intoxicant, coping mechanism is put into that child's life pre-14 years old. And so I want you to put that in the back of your mind. Let's jump into this. Let's see what kind of terminology and knowledge. If you know what these that I put up, we're going to go through a number of these. If you're taking notes, these are some of the things you can write down. Just raise your hand so I kind of know where we are in the group collaboratively as far as what we know. 420. Who knows what 420 is? Raise your hand. All right, perfect. About half. That's more than I normally get at a place. What is 420? Time you want to smoke, right? Because you get the munchies right before dinner, right? Yep. That's what my wife said anyway, right? Or else 420 is National what?
Weed Day.
National Weed Day. What else is 420? Marijuana. Anytime you ever see 420, you just replace it with marijuana. Someone says, hey man, I'm 420 friendly. What's that mean? We can get together and we can smoke some weed, all right? And so if your kids start talking about 420, it's not the time of day, it's not the date, it's talking about marijuana. How about this one, 710? Who knows what 710 is? Raise your hand. You've been to my class. Oh, come on. There has to be some more here. Nobody. All right, y'all can look around. I'm not lying, right? All right, what about BHO? Not BO. I am sweating my tail off out here, and I guarantee I got some BO. BHO. Anybody know what BHO is? Raise your hand if you do. What about butter? B-U-D-D-E-R. Not the kind we cook with. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. All right. So about 2% of you. All right. What about a nail is refers to marijuana drug paraphernalia? All right. 1. What about a dabber? D-A-B-B-E-R. All right, so a couple of y'all got your hands go up, and I don't want to see any of y'all do this. Okay. What about vaping? Anybody here vaping? Perfect. I put that one in there just to make sure y'all aren't lying to me. That's the only reason. All right. What about an oil rig, as it refers to marijuana drug paraphernalia? All right, so a couple of you. P-L-U-R. Lean, L-E-A-N. All right, so 2. Loud. 2, 4, 5, 6. All right. So if we start talking about getting loud, I'm not talking about like getting loud, okay? What about CCC, triple C's? All right. So let me ask y'all again. Who thinks you are really up to date on the drug usage stuff? Where you at? All right, cool. Boy, how that changed. Why are we here? We're here because of our kids, man. We're here because of our kids. This was taken at a school that I go to quite often. It's Waco Elementary. They had a Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and shortly after we got done playing with Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, me and Officer Hale, this isn't a kid, this is actually a police officer, although it looks like a kid, decided to play dodgeball with them, and they still use like the real dodgeballs, right? And so I was like, dude, we got to get out of this game like so fast, because the last thing I wanted to do is like hurl one of these balls and knock some kid's tooth loose, and then the news call me and be like, do you know anything about a kid breaking a nose? I'd be like, nope, sure don't, right? And so I was out of this game really quick. He and I were, because you can only imagine, if you're wearing a uniform, you've got like 20 kids on each side, who they throwing the balls at? You, right? And so it didn't last very long. But our kids, you see, not very long ago, I was on my way home from Frankfurt, and I was on I-75 crossing Clays Ferry Bridge coming into Madison County. And as I was crossing into Madison County, Post got a complaint of someone that was overdosing at the Shell Mart off of exit 95. So imagine you're on 627, I guess it's over here now, and you go to 75 and you just keep going, it runs right into the Shell Mart that I'm talking about. Everybody know where I'm at? Right? And so they asked the different troopers, hey, how close are you? And the closest trooper besides me was about 20 minutes away. And I was like, doggone it. I'm like 3 minutes away. You see, as I mentioned, as a public affairs officer, I rarely stop any cars. You've got to do something like really dumb in front of me, okay? Like if we're sitting at a red light and hanging out and my light's red and then all of a sudden it turns green and I get ready to go and I start moving and then the car goes the other way, I like put up my blinders. I'm like, I didn't see it, right? And then everybody else at the stoplight looks at me, starts honking, is like, and I'm like, they saw it, right? So now I gotta go stop this car. So I turn on my blue lights. Once I finally figure out how to do it, I stop the car. I walk into the car and I'm like, hey dude, don't run the red light, right? I had to stop you because everybody else here, they saw you do it and they saw me sitting there, okay? That's the world that I live in, all right? Or if I'm like driving down the road at the interstate like 79, because I don't want to drive too fast, but I don't want to drive 70. If you've ever seen a police officer drive 70 down the interstate, it's horrible, right? That's like something you do like when you're in a bad mood, right? And like, because it's like 4 miles of traffic behind you. And it's really funny, like everybody jockeys for position. They like get up there and like, and then they like tuck in and you're like, I feel like I'm in a NASCAR race, right? And I'm like the lead car. That's the world I live in. And then, so then the only car I stop is the one that goes past me. And I'm like, doggone it. Because everybody else, I got like 800 cars behind me watching this. I can't let that one car. And then I'm like, what are you doing passing me, right? So anyways, that's a long segue into this story. So I don't stop many cars. I don't answer complaints. That's all I was trying to say. So I'm the closest unit, and I thought, man, I don't want to see anything happen to this person if he's overdosing. And so I said, Richmond, I'll be en route. And so as I take the exit, the clerk on the end of the phone, she tells Post, she said, hey, the guy that's inside overdosing, he just got up and is walking out and is getting in his red pickup truck. And I was like, Probably not overdosing, right? Like I've seen people come back to life, but if they're overdosing, like you got to give them something, and then they're like, woohoo, and that hadn't happened. And so I thought, well, maybe he's visually and obviously impaired. And so as I pulled into the parking lot, she said, the red pickup truck's driving away from the gas pumps. And there in front of me, I see the red pickup truck driving away from the gas pumps. And like for a split second, like part of me wanted to be like, what red truck? Right? But I thought, I can't do that. What if this car drives down the road, crosses the center line, hits a car head on, or runs off the road, hits a tree and hurts himself? Then I would be partially liable for this. And I don't want to see that happen. So then like my second thought was, maybe I'm going to follow this car for a second, see if it crosses the center line, giving me probable cause to make a traffic stop. And I thought, what if the first time it crosses the center line, it's head on into another car? And so then I realized I have reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity is going on because of the lady named Teresa at the Shell Mart that called and said, this guy's high getting in this car. And so I thought, I'm going to stop the car before he ever gets out of the parking lot in the hopes of keeping other people and him safe. And so reached down, turned on my blue lights, and I stopped Charles there in the parking lot. I walked up to the driver's side of the vehicle. He rolled his window halfway down. He had ball cap on backwards. He had his sunglasses on. He had his seat leaned his back as far as it could go, which wasn't far, in a single cab S10. I said, hey man, I need to see your driver's license and your insurance. And he reached into his wallet, he fumbled through it, and out the window he handed me his credit card. No kidding, you can't make this kind of stuff up. I didn't miss a beat, I handed it right back. I said, sir, I take cash only. And he's like, oh, sorry. And he started looking for dollar bills, and I was like, I'm kidding. No kidding. He was like, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, I'm not your waitress, sir. I need to see your driver's license and your insurance. And so he gives me his driver's license. It's an expired insurance card. Over on the passenger seat of his pickup truck, I see a plate. Now, nothing wrong with having a plate inside of your car. But on this plate, he had a McDonald's straw. Nothing wrong with having a McDonald's straw, but it wasn't a McDonald's straw like this. It was a McDonald's straw like this, which would be used for one thing only, and that would be snorting. Man, y'all are good, okay? It'd be snorting something. And so I said, sir, I need you to hop out of the car. And he got out of the car. He was unsteady on his feet. He had slurred speech, a number of different kind of things. He threw his arm up over the bed of the pickup truck. And I said, sir, just save me the time, save you the trouble. Just be honest with me. What are you on? And he swallowed really hard and he said, ibuprofen. And I was like, me too. Different kind, obviously, right? You don't shop at the Dollar General for your ibuprofen like I do. So I ran him through field sobriety tests, and it was obvious that he was impaired. And I said, sir, I'm going to search your truck. I have probable cause that criminal activity is going on, that you're impaired because of drugs. And whatever I find, it is on you. We can start this conversation all over from the beginning. And so he stopped. He said, we can start over? And I said, yes, sir, we can start over. He said, well, I lied to you. And I was like, duh, right? That's what do you have? And so inside my pickup truck where I put my seatbelt in, tucked down in the seat, there's a prescription bottle. I said, what's in it? He said, some Percocets and Xanaxes. He said, you want me to go get them? I said, no, sir, that's okay. I'll go get them. And so I get into his pickup truck, I grab his prescription bottle, and I get back out and I go, Charles, what's your story? He said, I'm 27 years old. I've been addicted to pain medication for the last 14 years. Do the math. He sees a 13-year-old boy, the decisions he started making led him to the place that he was today, and it broke my heart. He said, my wife has left me. I don't have custody of my kids. I can't keep a job. I have a $300 a day habit. I've tried to quit, and I can't. I need some help. I said, sir, I'm going to try to get you some help. He said, well, can you start by dumping the pills out in the grass and letting me go? And I was like, no. Right? Because if we sweep things under the rug, if we pretend that a problem's not there, if we ignore the problem, do we get anybody the help that they ever need? No, not at all. So let's jump into this. Let's talk about alcohol. I have yet to meet a teenager that has great decision-making skills when it comes to alcohol. As in, wow, that was a great glass of Merlot wine that I had with my ribeye steak. The dryness cut through the fat on my tongue and just exemplified the rest of my meal, right? No, whenever a teenager drinks, they drink to get what? Drunk. Whenever they drink to get drunk. And so right here, I've got Sparks. Anybody ever try Sparks like back probably 15, 20 years ago? Okay. Do you care if I ask you a question about them? Tell me about Sparks. Just tell us about Sparks.
It had a nasty taste to me.
Okay. Yeah, it did. How many, what, drink 1, 2, what's the feeling?
1.
1. Why just 1?
It just didn't appeal to me.
Okay, well, that's good because I taught this class one time and someone in the back, I was like, has anybody ever tried? This guy raised his hand and I said, what happens after 1? He said, you are feeling it. I said, what happens after 2? He said, nobody knows. Right, so that's good. I tried these back in college and I can tell you, they were wild, right? Gummy bears, fortunately, I don't think they sell them anymore. Do they? I don't think so. Gummy bears, why would I have gummy bears on an alcohol slide? Soak them in liquor, right? Pour some vodka over the gummy bears. The vodka absorbs into the gummy bears. Put them in a baggie. Take them with you. It's like a Jell-O shot that's just portable. Take them with you, okay? Pocket shots right here. These right here, this is a new thing. Four Locos. Anybody ever try Four Locos? All right. So Four Locos comes in a 23.5-ounce can. Do I have anybody that appreciates a glass of wine with dinner? Which is totally fine. All right, so several of us, right? How big is a glass of, or a bottle of wine? 750 milliliters usually, right? And so as long as we're not using the glass that's 750 milliliters, that doesn't necessarily compute. But this right here is about the equal weight of liquid ounces to a bottle of wine. A bottle of wine oftentimes is 10, 11, 12, 13% alcohol. These right here are 12 or 23.5 ounces. They range from 12 to 14% alcohol depending on what they are. So one of these cans is like drinking an entire bottle of wine that tastes like some nasty Sprite, okay? It's also equivalent of drinking 5 to 5.5 Bud Lights. And so whenever I start talking about alcohol usage and some of the things that are out there, these are what we're talking about. And this is what oftentimes is going on. Flask right here. These are the fake tampons that are actually flasks. They have a tampon wrapper on the outside. Holds several ounces of liquor inside of them. And so I show this. There are hundreds of different products that are out there, but there's a lot of ways to conceal our booze. All right? And so before tonight, man, you start dealing with a teenager maybe you think has been drinking, and you open up their purse and you look, and before tonight you wouldn't pick up a tampon and go, oh. But after tonight, you might, all right? And so just pay attention. They make flip-flops that's a flask. They make sunscreen bottles, all kinds of crazy things. Let's see here. How many kids we have in the room? All right, so I'll hold off on this one. But they'll soak alcohol, liquor in a tampon, put it in an orifice of their body, and that's all I'm going to say. It goes straight into their bloodstream, bypassing the digestive tract, okay? Bottom left, Cepacol. Anybody ever take Cepacol? Besides me? Yeah, everybody's afraid to raise their hand now. No, we're all open, right? There are people here that have a past and a history, and this is a non-judgmental place. This is an educational place. So Cepacol right here. They're cough drops. I went to a complaint one night of a teenager walking in the road, either drunk or high. I pull in, I find this kid, he's 16 years old. I get out of the car and I was like, hey man, you been drinking? And he was like, no, I haven't been drinking. I was like, start smelling, because I never get lied to. Okay, I get lied to all the time, and I didn't smell it. I was like, wow, he's being honest. I was like, what about drugs? You on some drugs? He was like, no. And I was like, what's going on? He said, we had a party. I said, what kind of party? He said, we have a Cepacol party. And I was like, what's a Cepacol party? He said, we trip these cough drops, get a funny feeling, that's about it. I was like, whatever, you're an idiot, that's not a thing, get out of here, right? And he educated me. He didn't educate me, but whenever I went back to the post and I was like, holy cow, that's really a thing. They have dextromethorphan inside of them, which is the cough suppressant that is in a lot of cough syrups and stuff. It causes hallucinations, feeling of no pain. You can become very violent, angry on it, all right? And so they get high on the dextromethorphan, so robo-tripping, whenever you hear that term, that's what they're talking about. And so literally they were chewing up like a box of these to get high on the dextromethorphan. All right. This one right here. Anybody know what that is? Jolly Ranchers. We see lots of Jolly Ranchers. If you start seeing tons of Jolly Ranchers at your house, start paying attention. Or Skittles. That's known as lean. So that's a prescription cough syrup. They mix it with Sprite and Jolly Ranchers. They call it lean, purple drink, dirty Sprite. If you start listening to, I played one of the songs earlier, I'm on One. They talk about using their double cups. They mix it, sometimes purple, sometimes pink, depending on how they mix it, right? But that's what that is. The other thing you can do is they're also taking just like regular cough syrup, Robitussin. They're also mixing it with Arizona iced tea and Skittles. And so those are the things that are out there that we're seeing. This Robitussin has 10 milligrams of dextromethorphan inside of it, and so again they're getting high on the dextromethorphan. And so they're drinking like an entire bottle of cough syrup to get high. The other thing that I've got up here, that's the one I already had. Coricidin. I mentioned CCCs, triple Cs. Coricidin, cold and cough. That's what it is. Each one of these pills has 30 milligrams of dextromethorphan inside of it. And so we're finding these in a lot of collisions, a lot of wrecks where teenagers are driving because they're getting high on the dextromethorphan. The scary part is, while it still causes hallucinations, feeling of no pain, getting high, things like that, the antihistamine that is built into here is shutting down a lot of kids' internal organs. And so even if they go online into different blogs, they talk about the dangers of triple Cs. So most users are saying, hey, stick with the Robitussin, don't go to the triple Cs, but there's a lot of people that are trying to get high on the dextromethorphan, or on the Coricidin, cold and cough. So CCCs, that's what that is. And then for fun, I put, anybody know what those are? What kind of drugs? Yeah, Tide Pods, right? There's all kinds of internet challenges that are out there, and oftentimes what we see is if the challenge is there, someone is going to do it, right? I mean, it's like we've got the cinnamon challenge, where they take like a teaspoon of cinnamon, try to swallow it, which you can't really do. It makes you cough. If you inhale a lot of the cinnamon, it actually can cause some lung issues. We've got this condom challenge where people take a condom, put it in their nose, and pull it out their mouth. That's another one that we've got. And the worst one that's out there is that lip sync challenge for law enforcement. And the Kiki challenge, all that kind of stuff, right? But oftentimes that's going to come into play here in just a second whenever we start talking about some challenges. Marijuana, I've got marijuana here. Do I have anybody, and I've already surveyed the crowd, and I don't know if I have anybody this old, but do I have anybody like 1960s? I tried marijuana like maybe once. Okay, 1970s, try marijuana. Okay, 1980s. Okay, 90s. Okay, last week. Good call. That's the only one you don't want to answer to, right? So let me mention this. So 1960s, 1970s. You care if I ask you a question? Okay, so you try marijuana. What was the feeling? What ended up happening after trying marijuana or smoking it? Felt good, relaxed, get the munchies? Yeah. What was your munchie go-to? Pizza. That's always my favorite question. I asked that one time, and this guy was like, baked beans. I'm like, baked beans? And then I taught the same conference the next year, and he came back to my same class. I didn't recognize him. I was like, and so I asked the same question, 60s, 70s, they raised their hand, and I was like, what was your munchie go-to? He's like, you made fun of me before. I was like, tell me it's not baked beans. And he was like, it's baked beans. It was pretty funny. So marijuana, which has been around for thousands of years until it met American ingenuity, it all changed, okay? 1960s, 1970s, marijuana was about 3% THC. As you know, in the state of Kentucky, we grow hemp. In order for hemp to be hemp and hemp not to be marijuana, I think it has to have a THC concentration of less than like 3%. And so the marijuana of the 1960s, 1970s is much more comparable to hemp of today than marijuana, because if someone is buying marijuana and they're buying a THC concentration of less than like 15 or 16%, they're buying bad dope. All right? So 60s, 70s, 3%. Today, a lot of the strains we're seeing are in the 20 percentile. And so it has completely changed. Another reason I put this up here is Operation Unite, which is in southeastern, south central Kentucky. They ask people, whenever they come into the rehabilitation, they say, what is the first illegal drug that you ever tried? Nearly 100% of their entrants say what? Marijuana. In fact, anytime I have ever talked to somebody that suffers from a really hard drug addiction, I say, what's the first illegal drug you've ever tried? Almost every single time they say the exact same thing. And I put it up there because in the state of Kentucky, there's only one kind of person that sells marijuana, and they're known as a drug dealer. Yeah, right? And so I was doing a career day presentation to a group of seniors at a high school. And after I got done, I was wanting to see how accurate my information was. And so I said, how many of you right here or today, if you wanted marijuana right now, could go get it? Out of the 50 kids there, how many hands go up? Every single one. You see, our kids are going to school every single day, and they're having to make the decision whether to use or not to use. And oftentimes they have associations and relationships with drug dealers. And a drug dealer, I can promise you, doesn't have the best interest of that person in mind. They're looking for what? Money. And oftentimes a drug dealer sells multiple different kind of things. All right? And so they have a relationship. They show up one day, and they're like, hey, man, I'm out of weed. here's a couple of other things you can try, and oftentimes they end up walking down that path. The other reason I talk about it is in states where marijuana is legal, there are edibles, all right? Now, these aren't just staying in Colorado. We're going to talk about some of these. But instead of having alcohol gummy bears, now we have THC gummy bears, THC rainbow belts, peach tarts, stuff like that. Right here, so in each package, there's 25 individually infused 10 milligram pieces, okay? So just to give you an idea. So here's the thing. If it didn't say Edipure, would you have any idea that those are marijuana? No, probably not. So to test, I'm going to give you a 3-second test. You tell me which one's marijuana, if all of them are or if none of them are. Y'all ready? Yeah. All right, go. 1, 2, 3. Which one's weed? Who says all of them? All right, who says the top? Who says the bottom? You say the top. Who says the bottom? Who says none of them? And who's just afraid to guess? That's like 90% of the rest of y'all, okay? All right, so here we go. Here it is. The top ones, Incredibles gummies. Bottom ones are? Yeah, you know your candy. He's like, the bottom are dots. I don't know what the top are. All right, so there's lots of different kinds of things that are out there, right? If someone was to put those in a baggie, you'd have probably absolutely no idea. These are some of the first edibles that we had come through Kentucky. As you can see, they're old. It's like Twixt, Keef Cat, Buddha Finger, Munchie Way, Puffamint Patty, Trichrome Crunch. Those were all confiscated here in Kentucky. Cookies and cream, Strawberry Crunch, Sour Lemon Puckers, Root Beer Suckers. I've never read these upside down. This is kind of fun. The standard serving size is 10 milligrams, but here's what I want you to pay attention to. The intoxicating effect of this product may be delayed by 2 or more hours. So, teenagers, they have great decision-making skills, right? Or do you think risky behavior goes along with them? All right, so we'll just say risky behavior, all right? So they say, man, I want to get high on these edibles. They eat a gummy bear. 5 minutes later, they don't feel anything. What do? Eat another one. They don't feel anything. What do? How many gummy bears can you eat in 2 hours? A lot, right? It's like, how many gummy bears do you have, right? Like that's going to be our limiting thing. And so oftentimes what ends up happening is they can overconsume because they're just like, man, I'm not feeling anything. And all of a sudden it's like, starts kicking in. Don't take my word for it. There's a New York Times reporter that ended up reporting on the social revolution.